Welkom bij Café Weltschmerz. Vandaag weer een speciaal interview met een internationale gast. Vandaar dat we de rest van de aflevering in het Engels zullen doen. Hi Chris, welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. We spoke, I think, mainly on Instagram, Zoom. You've been an outspoken advocate for freedom. But for the people who have not seen your clips going around on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, please tell us, who is Chris?
Well, originally, I'm in the residential low-rise development business back in Ontario, Canada, where I'm from, where I was born. I've been in that industry for almost 3 decades. So I've been working with government for over 2 decades. So I know how they operate. And I was never political. I was never any type of freedom fighter. I've never been to a protest in my life. I just happened to be on vacation with my wife, coming through the Netherlands and Italy, right in February, the end of February, February 27th, actually, on her birthday, we landed in Venice for Carnival, the day they actually canceled Carnival for the first time ever. So I was introduced into COVID basically by becoming right in the epicenter of the virus for Europe, and the outbreak happened. And right away, the information that was being shown on television, especially in Canadian television, we were getting phone calls, versus the reality on the ground was so conflicting that we knew right away something was wrong. They were blowing it way out of proportion, and we knew it was going to be something big. And then sure enough, they started locking down Italy. We basically escaped Italy, made it back to the Netherlands, had a nice weekend, went to Paris, and then COVID hit Paris. We ended up having to leave Paris March 3rd to go back to Canada. And the first thing we did tell everybody is they're probably going to lock down Canada like they locked down Europe. And sure enough, they did. And the first thing I realized when they're locking people down is they're going to close these businesses. And in a country like Canada, small business represents 97% of all the businesses in Canada, 70% of the jobs, and a huge percentage of the GDP. Basically, it's the backbone of the economy, the backbone of the middle class. So right away, anybody that understood economics, didn't matter about science at that point, would realize that this is going to destroy the economy.
And with that, do much more harm also to the public health than it could ever avoid in a case of a pandemic.
Thank you.
Which was very clear, I think,
early on.
At least or April 2020, there was no public health emergency.
Thank you. Thank you. It was clear as day to anybody that understood economics and anybody that understood the economies of the world that the COVID pandemic restrictions imposed by the government were going to cause far more damage to the economy and to the public health and to the average mental health of the average citizen than COVID could ever do.
Our Ministry of Economic Affairs has made a report in April 2020 exactly stating this. So that's a QALY, there's a quality adjusted life years, stating that the damage would be at least 6 times greater, and later on, we had to admit it was 20 times greater than it could ever have avoided.
And if they got another season to impose their COVID restrictions, I believe it would have been so great that it would have been almost impossible for average nations to recover economically, even after a 10-year period. We were looking at a couple of decades of recovery after that, worse than a Great Depression crash.
It almost sounds like a great reset.
That's exactly what it is, and that's exactly what it was supposed to be. They have a time clock. Their time clock is 2030. You keep hearing them reference that date. It's not an accident. It's called Agenda 2030 for a reason. And the COVID pandemic was the way to kickstart that agenda. That COVID pandemic was a way to build that infrastructure that they needed, and the COVID pandemic was a way to train the average citizen that the idea of rights and freedoms are not paramount to a successful society.
So that brings me to, I think, a rally in September 2020 where you had a very ignominious or famous, depending on how you look at it, interview where you predicted to the date and to the event what would happen in the coming 2 years. And you were proven right. A lot of people shared it back then, and even more people have shared it later on. So you were pushed to the forefront. What happened? You were working in real estate and suddenly you're this human rights activist.
Oh, you can blame my wife for that. We had no idea. I just knew the businesses were in trouble. I knew I wanted to help people. And one day my wife saw an online flyer for a protest at Queen's Park in Toronto. Never been to a protest, didn't know what to expect. We went there. It was exactly as I expected. A couple hundred people, completely disorganized. Nobody knew anybody. Nobody knew anything. And the mainstream media was there making it look exactly how it was. They didn't even have to lie this time. They could just film and tell the truth. It was that bad. So I ended up getting frustrated, and I grabbed one of the cameras and I put it on myself, and I gave the guy a piece of my mind about what was really going on and what was going to happen. And a bunch of people heard, and they all said, "Oh, you need to speak. You could help a lot." And I said, "Oh no, I don't want to be the center of attention. I don't want to be attacked by the media. I don't want them to go after my business. I don't want them to go after my family. I don't want them to drag my name through the mud. I don't want to get arrested. I know exactly what's going to happen if I start speaking out, because I know exactly how these dictatorships work."
But you did, and all of those things also came to fruition.
It's true. I did, because my wife came and told me that I had a responsibility to do so because I was able to do so. And if I didn't, who else would? And then she went even further and said, if I didn't, everything that happens would be my fault. So I woke up the next day and I said, fine, I'll go speak. And sure enough, like you said, every single thing happened. I've been arrested 23 times in 25 months, 2 times on this European tour, when I've been to Europe every year for the last 20 years and never been arrested before.
So there you trumped me. I've been arrested only 4 times, but there's 3 court cases going on against me. So are you arrested, and are they trying to keep you in prison? Are they charging you, or is it just harassing you?
Oh, they're definitely charging me and trying to keep me in prison. In Canada, I'm not even allowed to drive. I'm not even allowed to, I wasn't banned from flying on Canadian Airlines, and it wasn't even a legitimate court order. It was just a secret agreement between the airlines that get so many government subsidies. The government can tell them what to do. They took away my legal...
And if people think this is crazy...
That's not crazy.
Look at Rebel News, Yavi, I think, who tried to fly from Australia to New Zealand, and then by accident found out that Interpol put his name on the no-fly list.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Thank God I wasn't put on a real no-fly list, but Canada has been doing everything that any dictatorship does. People like Pat King were put in jail for 150 days, and when he got out, his bank accounts were still frozen for being associated with the trucker convoy. And the trucker convoy is one of the reasons I believe that not only did it start a movement here in the Netherlands, but I believe it's one of the big reasons around the world that we're not seeing another round of COVID restrictions this year.
I'm very sure about that. I know the 2nd of January this year, we had a rally in Amsterdam. Again, police brutality, not as widespread as they would normally do. But now the media reacted differently. It directly got attention. And when I gave the speech, I said, this is the turning point. And then the trucker protest in Canada happened. I think it was the end of January something.
Yeah, that's when it started.
Yeah. And it showed that the government didn't have any real power. And that was your main point from the beginning. If you do not comply, it all stops.
That's correct. In April 2020, I came out with the phrase united non-compliance and the saying, just say no. And the whole point is, all you have to do as an individual is simply just say no to every one of their restrictions or every one of the things they want to implement.
You wrote a book about it?
I did. I wrote the first book in the history of the world to be banned by Amazon the day before it went on sale. So I ended up having to self-publish it after having the publishing deal with them. And then they banned it from being sold online as well, so I could only sell it in person at events. But somebody actually translated it to Dutch, and there is a publisher that's going to be publishing it here in the Netherlands in Dutch, and it'll be distributed from here in the Netherlands, so it's going to be very easy for people to get their hands on here.
So what strikes me as very odd, and this is happening all over the world, so the whole idea that this is just a few corrupt, incapable politicians, that is a false notion. If you still believe that, then you're not paying attention. But especially with censorship, this is the mark of totalitarianism. Now, if it's so blatant, because you have also lost a few social media accounts...
Oh, that's an understatement.
Your book cannot be published. I run into the same problems, but we are not alone. Thousands of other people who are also speaking out are banned, are prosecuted, are arrested, are harassed, are censored. That should tell you something is going on.
Of course, everybody understands that something's going on, but they do those things for two reasons. They do those things because it's effective when you can censor somebody, and they also do those things to deter other people. A lot of people don't want to be on the spotlight. They don't want to be arrested, charged, etc. So they won't speak out. That's why they're called the silent majority. And throughout COVID, everybody was too afraid to speak out because no one wanted to be called a conspiracy theorist, an anti-vaxxer, an anti-masker, an extremist, a terrorist, even Trudeau called us, etc. And now that everybody basically realized the jab, the solution, is far more dangerous than COVID itself. And
and maybe most importantly, it didn't deliver.
No kidding.
It was a scheme, a Ponzi scheme.
100%. It was never meant to cure a disease. It was meant to enable a perpetual pandemic, a perpetual cycle, like I said in September, that people will never get out of. They didn't coordinate all these global restrictions, 5 levels of lockdown, and give it to a global health body to disseminate to all the countries of the world because this wasn't a coordinated effort to control you. That's the only thing that could possibly be.
Now, looking back, it sounds so logical and simple, yet I think there was enough information to put all the pieces together and to see this is a coup de monde, we could say. Canada has played a prolific role, as has the Netherlands. And it's not a coincidence that Trudeau and Mark Rutte are best buddies and are really in the forefront trying to push these Agenda 2030 goals.
It's huge. We have a huge collaboration. Right now, there's a collaboration between the Netherlands and us. From the World Economic Forum, it's the Trusted Traveler Identity Program. It's the digital ID for travel. And they're using Schiphol Airport and Toronto Airport. They're using KLM Airlines and Air Canada. And they're making your airport and our main airport as crazy as possible, so people will want to try the new program where they can bypass security and all the lineups, and all they have to do is submit to this wonderful digital identity. And it's not an accident they're using those two airports because, like you said, Netherlands is their main target, because now that they've been exposed, now that everybody knows that COVID was just a vehicle to implement more tyrannical policies, they had to switch gears. So now they're using the climate change agenda so they can enact laws that under a pandemic would only be available during emergency. But under climate change, these could be there perpetually for generations. And what they also want to do is this new narrative of a global recession as a cover for making every single thing in your life more expensive. What do we see in the Netherlands? A massive energy crisis.
It's expropriation, to be honest.
That's exactly what it is.
And they blame Russia because it's always easy to blame somebody else.
They need a boogeyman. They need an excuse. Otherwise, everybody will realize it's actually the government doing this intentionally. The government loves to pretend like they're inept. They didn't know what was going on, because it's a lot easier to think of them as a fool rather than as a cold, calculated, sinister evil in your life. And
I think the problem there is all the marketing people, the ministers, even the prime ministers, these are people who sell a product. They are not making the policy. How much is the awareness at those levels? And that is, I think, difficult to discern, that the architect types, of course, they know what they're doing because they wrote the plan. But to what level are people aware of their crimes?
Well, that's why, if you notice in politics, they're not really putting the best and brightest. They put people that they know they can easily manipulate, easily control, and then have plausible deniability of. But when you look at the country's policies on a whole, it's easy to see that this is dictated far higher than the government levels. They always have some kind of non-government organization, global, that dictates the policies downward. And really, it comes straight from, in my opinion, the king, way in London, and that's why we started this tour in London. And we happened to be there when the Queen was getting buried, at the same time that Trudeau, Biden, and all 500 other world leaders were there. And this is where they were talking about that global recession and talking about how now the way to get their digital identity, their universal basic income, their digital currency, and their global technocratic control grid is not with more masks and jab mandates, but now just make everything more expensive, especially food, so the average person simply cannot make ends meet monthly without government assistance.
Exactly. It's a dependency program.
That's right.
And in reality, that's slavery.
It's exactly what it is. It's complete slavery, because once you need the government to survive, they no longer serve you as they are supposed to. Now they rule you. They'll give you some money so you can buy food, but now you're going to have to enter into the digital identity. Now you'll have to get the jabs that they want you to get. Now you'll have to be on a digital currency. China just introduced their digital currency and told their citizens it's going to expire. So once they do something like that, they have you in a complete closed control
Money that
grid.
expires is not money, yeah? It's a
privilege. It's a privilege.
Yes.
It's a privilege to survive under their circumstances.
Yes.
And it's a way to ensure that you can never save enough to get out from under their dependency. You can never become successful or pass anything down to your children. And it's to ensure that your children and their children's children end up the same slavery as you, and even worse, because at that point they can do literally whatever they want to you.
Yes, the gene editing program, transhumanism. The White House has published a whole paper on this. What was a far-right extremist conspiracy theory 2 years ago is now officially the policy of the White House.
Yeah. It's crazy how conspiracy theory only becomes months from being reality.
Exactly. The expiry date becomes shorter and shorter.
That's.
So let's go back to the timeline. You have predicted this. You have spoken to people. Do you think we have accomplished something? Because when I look at the program, in my view, the planning was to do at least one more season of COVID. Now, we saw COVID crumbling and collapsing in January this year. Then, of course, a quick deviation or smokescreen was the war in Ukraine. Then we got to climate change, the nitrogen crisis of biodiversity. And by then, I noticed a lot of people just had it. In July in Holland with the farmer protest, and you have been driving around, you see all the upside down flags. This is massive. From the start on, it was 80%, and it keeps going. Like people keep standing behind the farmers, and now we are in a situation where the majority is far-right extremist conspiracy theorists, and that doesn't work.
No. And that's why I think it's undeniable that we have achieved our largest victory in this war so far, our largest battle victory, because everyone thinks it's over. It's not over. They just were forced to switch tactics. They would have loved to put us under another lockdown, destroy even more of the economy, put us even more in debt, and have plausible deniability and keep all these emergency powers for as long as possible. But we fought back. People spreading awareness, people speaking out, people organizing protests, people suing the government. It was legal actions and it was giant protests that got them to back down. The only reason they got rid of the travel mandates in Canada, and now you and other people around the world can come, is because there was multiple lawsuits that got amalgamated into one Supreme Court case. And during that court case, Trudeau's own experts testified under oath in court that not only did they not recommend the vaccine mandates to travel, they recommended against them because they said that they would not help. Meanwhile, Trudeau is telling us since their implementation that he was only doing what his experts told him. And if they let that court case go to fruition, they're going to find him guilty and they'll never be able to introduce those restrictions again. So they're trying to get it thrown out with what they're calling a moot point. Because now that the law is no longer a law, well, why do we need to talk about this?
Yes,
so it's just another tactic of stalling.
The funny thing is, this happened in Canada, and immediately the Netherlands followed suit on the 17th of September. Also, and some people don't know it, because if you're Dutch, if you're an inhabitant of the Schengen area, you don't have restrictions coming in or going out of Holland anymore.
We did.
Exactly. If you're not part of the Schengen area, you still have these restrictions until the 17th of September. So this was taken out, and that shows that they have to have switch gears.
Yep. And it shows that
it doesn't make sense to do that in the start of the flu season.
That's right. And it shows that what we do doesn't just affect our own countries, it affects things internationally, and that's why we're on an international tour. They literally changed the law and allowed me to fly into the Netherlands 3 days after I flew into Europe. That's some pretty good timing, if I do say so myself. So for people to say that we haven't had an impact, it's completely undeniable. The government wants you to believe that you didn't have an impact, because the last thing they want you to know is that you have the power and you have the control. So they're doing this whole change of gears and basically trying to pretend like COVID never even happened, because they don't want you to know that COVID would still be going on right now if you didn't stand up for yourselves. And now you're going to have to stand up to the new agenda of climate change, and Netherlands is going to get hit the hardest. Because like it or not, You guys are the #1 food supplier in all of Europe. And that's why they already passed these laws to affect nitrogen emissions that are going to cripple your food supply, put generation of families of farmers out of business, and give more government control over the people. And food prices are going to go up even higher. It's going to be harder to get high quality food, and it's not going to just cripple the Netherlands economy. It's going to cause a domino effect to all the countries that you guys export to. And that's exactly what they want.
Absolutely. And Holland was still very rich in the sense that also the Dutch economy is heavily reliant upon small business owners. And they have property. Like the houses that people own themselves instead of renting is a very high percentage in Holland. So with the Great Reset, I think Holland also needs to be hit hardest. If we look at Germany, it's already devastating. Oh. It's gone. It's beyond repair.
It's really bad. They can't even keep the lights on, the street lights on over there. And they have really bad COVID. They have COVID measures worse than anybody. They're trying to introduce a mandatory mask law from every October to March. Their COVID app that they want people to download starts out green, and then after 3 months it goes yellow to remind you that you got to get your booster. And once it goes yellow, you're supposed to have to wear a mask everywhere. It's disgusting.
In that sense, Germany is an odd duck, because everywhere around the world, countries are dropping their mandates and their restrictions. Do you think that we need to push against the COVID narrative again? I feel that we really have to tear down the curtain so that people see the complete deceit that was perpetrated.
I agree. COVID is like just one arm of this beast. We already cut that arm off. Now it's time to cut the head off. And the head is that they're trying to literally starve you into submission. They're doing what every tyrant in the history of mankind did to the people when the people start to rile up. Only this time, they're trying to do it in a way where rather than just starve you and create really lineups of breadlines, they want you to just submit to downloading all this stuff digitally, and you'll be able to get food pretty much with ease, but they'll completely control you. And they're hoping that most people will just roll over and do this submissive state. But the reality is, people don't want to be dependent on the government. People are dependent on the government at no other option. And if the government leaves a lot of people with no other option but being dependent on the government, the people are much more liable to remove that government and place a government in power that's going to allow them to make their own decisions for their own lives.
In Germany, we see laws being changed. So civil servants working at the Defense Department, but also finance, also internal affairs, are now allowed to carry firearms. So in Germany, they understand civil war is brewing. How do you see that in the other countries, for instance, Canada and the Netherlands?
It's happening everywhere. And if politicians put people in a position with nothing to lose, there's lots of people that from the COVID restrictions enacted by the government lost their house, lost their marriage, lost their job, lost their kids. When those kinds of people have nothing left and you've created thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of those people, they're going to show up on your doorstep like they did hundreds of years ago. And your gun and your security services aren't going to save you from thousands and thousands of people that you just destroyed the lives of.
Still, I feel that they want to have a sort of preemptive strike. And we have seen that on the 6th of January 2021, the storming of the Capitol, which is a false flag operation.
For sure.
August 2020, we saw it in Berlin, the storming of the Reichstag, the so-called right-wing extremists. We've also had a similar event here in Holland, the 6th of January this year. Somebody showed up on the doorstep of our Minister of Finance, which she was not yet, but would become within a few days. That guy spent 6 months in jail.
Well, we had an incident in Canada that was planned for September 11th, aka 9/11, by an actor who showed up during the trucker convoy, and he had all the makings of controlled opposition. And of course, he started trying to rally extremists for a September 11th event to surround an RCMP facility and demand that they arrest Trudeau, and with all these lists of demands. Basically, exactly a copy of the January 6th thing to try to demonize the freedom movement, allow them to pass laws that would enable them to go after people like me, stop protests, stop organization, etc. But thanks to the people like me, we exposed that guy. He was forced to step down, and the entire thing just fizzled out and never actually happened.
And I think this is a great example of why we have to still be patient. Still, our core motivation is love and truth. If we give in to violence, we actually give them the biggest weapon they want to use.
That's right. And that's why they're trying to provoke. Right now, with COVID, they weren't worried because everyone was scared. Scared people aren't going to be violent. They're going to be paralyzed with fear and wait to be told what to do. Then when the people started realizing COVID was a scam, they started getting angry. We started brewing. We made things happen peacefully. So then they rolled back things. Now they want to do the slow kill. And they want to do it with rising prices, your gas prices, your energy prices, your house prices, and of course your food prices. When all those things are rising every single month, how many months will it be until you can't make ends meet without the government assistance?
Exactly. That's why on the rally last Sunday, you burned your energy bill. And I think this is also a great initiative all around the world because they're trying to expropriate you. We did a few broadcasts trying to explain to people it is illegal from the standpoint of the government and the energy companies, so there is no legal requirement to pay the full price.
I agree.
Personally, I told the company I will keep paying the price that I paid at the beginning of the year, and if you do not like it, please take me to court.
That's right. And if they cut off the energy, a lot of people will have human rights complaints against these people. So that's the power people really have. The more you submit, the more they're going to take from you. I told people this 2 years ago. The more you comply, the longer this goes, and the more rights and freedoms you're going to lose. Now it's gotten to the point where all those people that kept their head down, they wore their masks, they took their jabs, if they survived their jabs, now they're wondering why they didn't get all their stuff back. And now they're wondering why their compliance isn't just costing them their rights and freedoms. Now it's just costing them money and more money. And you're not making more and more money every month. You're probably getting, what, a 1% increase a year, while inflation is in double digits year over year, and even more so on all the essentials you need to live. It doesn't take a genius to figure out where this goes. And no matter how many masks you put on your face, how many jabs you take, or how many orders you follow for the government, you're not going to be able to feed yourself. You're not going to be able to feed yourself.
I'm at the police station quite a lot because I file charges on a weekly basis, I would say. So I see a shift there as well. Last Thursday I was there and this guy from Internal Affairs, he says, well, I have to admit, you wappies, he calls them, were right at some points, and it's not going very well. And apparently that is needed for the people who carry out these orders to feel it themselves, to start losing themselves and realize I'm at the wrong side.
Yeah, that's what it is, because a lot of these people just told themselves they're doing everything for social order, some of them doing it for their pension, some of them believe they're doing the right thing, but deep down they knew they weren't. And now there's enough evidence to show that, especially when you're seeing jab-injured police officers or jab-injured people in their family. And these are the mandates that they were enforcing on people, and now they're getting their comeuppance for it. And a lot of them disagree with it. I can attest. I was arrested in Ireland. Every single police officer there knew that the government was the enemy. They knew it, and they all said they're not going to enforce COVID restrictions. They said they would never put a mask on again, and they said that they want the government to address all the crises for the Irish people, and they knew the government was not doing that, and in fact wasting money on the complete opposite. So they're losing control over their enforcers.
They're losing their minions.
Exactly, and that's why they're trying to set up an international force. They'd love to bring in international private police forces that are foreign in nature and have absolutely no ties to anybody in the country except for the people they serve, which would be the government.
So in Europe, that's called the Eurogen Force. There is already a military international police. They have been trying out. We have had reports of German military police acting in Holland and acting in Denmark. Mm-hmm. That's very sensitive to send Germans around.
Yep.
But we can expect these things to continue,
of course,
especially when we start to use violence.
Oh,
and
that's
I think
what they
our
want.
biggest weapon is time and mass.
Time is their biggest enemy. They only have so much time to implement their agenda because every single day more and more people wake up, and when people wake up, more and more people just say no. So when that happens, when we hit that critical mass of people and they're completely exposed and everybody stops complying, they're done. So their time was up with COVID. They're trying to buy themselves more time by switching gears, letting everybody relax from COVID while they implement their climate change policies to destroy the farmers and destroy industry. And they're going to use their global recession to crush families. And that's their new game. And they think they can get it going. And it's going to happen so slowly that it's going to do the same thing with COVID. Just paralyze the people and thinking, okay, it's going to be better next month. It's going to be better next month. And then 2 years later, when their bills are twice as much as they were last year or more, and they can't afford to pay them anymore, now they're going to be pleading with the government to save them. That's what they hope. And we've been telling everybody since day one, stop waiting for someone to save you. You're not going to vote your way out of this. All the politicians are corrupt. The next one that they're going to put up in front of you, like Pierre Poilievre in Canada, he's just the same as the last guy. They're still going to do everything they're told to do, and they're still going to impoverish you. They're there to make you feel like you have a way that you can sit on your couch and simply vote your way out of this. And if you notice, that hasn't worked for hundreds of years.
I think this might be the most important point. We got in this mess not through COVID, not even through Agenda 2030, but by our complacency.
Yep.
Because we gave our responsibility to a politician. We are in the West, but I would say worldwide, in a leadership cultus. We think that we need a savior. We need somebody to represent us instead of representing ourselves.
That's what I've been going around the world telling everybody, that you cannot wait for someone to save you. I've been teaching you how to save yourself. And the way to save yourselves is to literally not comply with these measures that you know are not in your best interest. Then guess what? It doesn't matter what puppet they put in charge. If whoever's telling you to do something, if you're not going to do it, you're not going to do it.
Well, and we see actually the opposite effect. As soon as the public opinion shows the power doesn't have any real power, they change the policy and say, that was the plan all along.
Of course, because they want to, the government is always right. Obviously, it wasn't the people that made the government change. It was the government got some new data right at that moment, and that changed everything. Obviously, they're lying. The reality is the people always have the power, and they spend billions and billions and billions of dollars to convince you otherwise. Just like with the Queen's funeral. I had to tell the people in London, like, did the Queen die affect your life more than if your own mother or your own sister or your own daughter or husband died? And everyone in the crowd chatted, no. I go, so why do you think they spend millions and millions and millions of dollars broadcasting this all over the world? Because they want you to feel like you don't matter. Because the moment they can get you to feel like that, you will comply.
This brings me to the core of what we call the narrative, the scenarios, the plan, Operation Lockstep, you name it. If we go back to Mussolini, he was inspired by a few philosophers, French philosophers, Le Bon and Sorel. And they made a very astute analysis of Marxism, actually. They said, Marxism and the bourgeois and the class warfare. Now, we have to focus on the myth. We have to rally people around a story.
And that's what they did. That's what they did around the world. And in doing so, their ultimate goal was to destroy each national identity, because people will stand up for each other if they have a strong community feeling, if they have a strong national identity. And that's why they're flooding all these countries with people from all over the world, because they want to destroy the national identity of every country. That's why they're coming after the children with all these crazy agendas, like telling kids...
The LGBTI, the disruption agenda.
The LGBT is one thing. When they start getting into trans and telling children they can be cats, etc., and having teachers... In Canada, there's a teacher dressed in giant prosthetic breasts with nipples hanging out and little booty shorts. If a woman was dressed like that, she would be fired. But a man dressed like that is not only not fired, he's praised as some new wonderful thing. It's insane. And that's what they're doing. They also want to replace the parents as the primary caregivers. And the parents did the job for them. The last 2 years, how many kids came home and went to their parents and said, Mommy, Daddy, I don't want to wear the mask? And what did the parents do? They made up some lie for why they had to wear them. And they ultimately said, listen to your teacher. So now what does the kid know? Who's in charge, the parent or the teacher?
This reminds me of Pol Pot, Khmer Rouge, social engineering. And I think what we see here is not so new.
No,
it has been tried since the French Revolution, since mass politics, over and over again, with the false notion or the false story to elevate the masses, was actually to con them, to take everything from them, and to install a neo-feudalist system again.
Yeah, not really take everything from them, convince them to give it up willingly. That was the genius. They told you, rights and freedoms are now selfish and dangerous. Compliance is now a virtue. And any actual masculine man is toxic. You got to destroy the alpha male before you could take over society.
Yes, all these disruptions are focused at the core of our society, of our culture.
That's right.
Now, I think a lot of these movements are exposed or are being exposed. There's a lot of pushback, especially from the conservative side that was not so aware of the whole COVID agenda, but with climate change and especially with the LGBTI, we see a massive rise on the right, which I also think might be a risk because this is not a political movement.
Exactly. That's why I don't like when people say left and right, because this has nothing to do with left, right, or any type of politics. This is about freedom and independence versus a technocratic slavery worse than any dystopian future you can imagine. It's really that simple. We are at a crossroads where we go right and we expose these people, we depose these people, we get all the money back from these people, and all of a sudden every citizen in every country has a much higher standard of living for generations to come, and we have a golden era around the world. Or we do nothing and we go left and they implement their entire technocratic control grid, and we're all slaves for the rest of the foreseeable future and generations to come.
So, back to you. You're doing a tour in Europe.
Yes.
So what is your plan in the very near future and the coming months?
Well, we're ending the tour. Well, we're going one more stop, but it's a secret stop. We're just going there for a few days of recreation because we were supposed to go to Jamaica. However, I was informed by multiple people that work international security services that it would be a very dangerous place and someone like me would more than likely end up a statistic if we went there, and I didn't want to put my wife and my family at risk. And they didn't seem very organized over there, so if they want me to come to Jamaica, they're going to have to do a little bit better job next time because I can't sacrifice my family for going somewhere. That's just not going to happen. But when we get back to Canada, we're getting back to Canada on the 10th of October. On the 11th, we have a private event in Montreal, and then we're going to be heading back towards Alberta. I already have 4 days planned in British Columbia, October 20th, 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. And then we're trying to make it into San Diego, California, our first time in the U.S. for the 29th of October before we go out to Mexico. So we have a very tight schedule. We have a lot of traveling, a lot of driving, hours and hours and hours of all. We don't stop. It's pretty crazy.
So
but we keep going, but we make sure that we enjoy ourselves every step of the way because that's what this is all about. Life is about enjoying your life, living life the way you want. They're trying to control you, so the best thing you can do to combat that is live the way you want and enjoy yourself to the fullest. So I don't care how many things I got to do during the day, we always find time to do something special and memorable, so it's not just like we're working, we're actually enjoying our life more than we could imagine.
Great to have you here.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks for the conversation, man.
Thank you, brother. I can't wait to come back. I'll never stop. I won't stop until I feel like everybody's free.
Thanks.
Cheers.